Hello, and welcome to Story Behind the Story, where readers and authors connect, romance readers and romance authors connect. I'm Reese Ryan, author of sexy, emotional romantic fiction featuring lots of family drama, surprising secrets, and a cast of complicated, sometimes messy characters. And here on the show, we have interactive reader and author discussions like the one we're having today. And today's topic deals with just how much reality do you want in your romance? And we're going to talk about whether or not bringing real life issues into romance can actually make the HEA even more impactful. But before we get into today's discussion and my guest, Adriana Herrera, I'm going to give you an idea of what we're going to be talking about next week. On deck for next week, we'll be talking about seasoned romance, or what I call grown folks romance, and that is romance featuring older characters. My guest next week will be Karen Booth, authors Karen Booth, Suzette Harrison, Cheryl Lister, and Lisa Salvery, who runs the Facebook group Romance in Her Prime, will be joining us as well. And we're going to talk about the fact that readers do, in fact, want more of these romances with older characters, despite what publishers might make you think in terms of whether or not there's a market for it. So, and that discussion is going to happen next week, and it's going to be at a special time, 8 p.m. So to make sure that you don't miss it, be sure to hit the subscribe button and the reminder bell below so that you'll be notified of that discussion and future discussions as well. So next week, if you write romance featuring older characters, you read it, you want to see more of it, or you don't. And we'd love to hear from you. So back to this week. As always, we keep our discussions as interactive as possible. So get your fingers ready to type in your comments, or if you use talk to text, be ready. We want to hear what you have to say, and we want you to be involved in the conversation. You are what makes the show so exciting and so much fun for us. So by all means, we want to hear what you have to say. So getting right back to this week, my guest is Adriana Herrera. So without further ado, I'm going to bring her on. Hi there, Adriana.
Hi.
It's so nice to have you here on the show. And first of all, I love to be able to chat with different authors and stuff. And it's always fun to get to know them. But it's always even nicer when I've actually got a chance to meet the person in person, and I got a chance to meet you at RWA 2019, my only RWA that I got a chance to go to. So thank you for coming and being here. So for people who are not familiar with you, tell them a little bit about who you are and what you write.
Well, I write mostly contemporary romance, although I'm venturing into historical now. So my tagline is I write romance full of people who look and sound like my people. And that means getting unapologetic happy endings. So that means I'm from the Dominican Republic. I was born and raised in the Caribbean. And so I write people for Afro-Latinx. I write immigrants. I've been in the U.S. since I was 23. So I write about the immigrant experience in the U.S. I write Black and brown people falling in love. I write about queer communities of color. So that's I guess that's what encompasses my people. It's all those different intersections of my own identity.
I love it. So you've been here in US since you were 23. So you are an adult. Okay, that's awesome.
Yes. I came after college for graduate school.
Nice, very nice. Well, again, thank you for being here with us. So Publishers Weekly calls your latest release Here to Stay a knockout and says that it is hot, heartwarming, and hilarious. So tell us a little bit about the premise of the story and what inspired it.
So I guess one of the most interesting things about it is that it's in a completely different part of the country. My previous books, other than two books that are not in the US, but the Dreamer series, which was my debut series, was set in New York, in upstate New York and New York City. And this series is set in Dallas, Texas. And so it's a book about New Yorkers in Dallas, Texas. So it's Julia del Mar Ortiz, who's a Dominican Puerto Rican nonprofit program director, and she's working for a department store foundation. And she came to Dallas with her boyfriend, who quickly dumps her and goes back to New York City to be with his side chick. So she ends up staying in Dallas and kind of like refusing to go home, dumped and like with her tail between her legs. And she's just like determined to make things work. So in comes Rocco Quinn, who's also a New Yorker, and he has been basically tasked with taking the company public. So he's going to make it go like public in the stock market. And part of his like task basically is to cut the programs from the foundation. So they're sort of at odds from the get-go. And of course, things happen and there's like an HEA, but it's a completely new series. I just actually announced today that I am going to write more in that universe. There's 2 more books planned. I envisioned it as a 4-book series, but I'm at least going to write 2 more.
Awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So many exciting things happening for you. We're going to get into more of that in a bit as well. So your female protagonist, Julia Del Mar Ortiz, is having a hell of a year, which seems pretty apropos out here in real world 2020. So give us a little bit more insight into Julia's character. I didn't get a chance to read the entire book, but I got a chance to read the opening where she's having this conversation with her mother and her abuela.
Yes. Her mom and her abuela, who are, super overprotective. So I read a lot about family. I read a lot about biological family, and I read a lot about found family. Like the Dreamer series was a a group of 4 guys who were best friends, grew up in the Bronx together, and like all the books kind of follow them as they fall in love. I love writing found family, but I also love writing Afro-Latinx families. I think people of color, I don't know. I've heard someone call people of color bodies of culture instead of people of color. And I love that phrase. I love that term because I think there's so much to us that's so tied to like our cultural selves. And I love writing, like the book opens with Julia basically like struggling with her mom and her grandmother, who keeps sending her food, who keeps sending her like lotion,
pounds and pounds of food.
Yes. And so she's having this really hard time. But part of what I try to do with Julia's character in that book specifically is that I was trying to kind of like talk about like that time of life when you come from a family that's lovely and supportive and wonderful, you're also trying to like break out on your own. And so for her as a first generation Dominican Puerto Rican, there's so much that's tied to your parents' dreams, and like so much of you that's tied to like the sacrifices that your parents made for you.
Right.
And I like to talk about that specifically in the immigrant experience, kind of like that venturing on your own and, like in a way, like trying to be independent, you're breaking your parents' heart a little bit because they want you to be close to them, because there's, the immigrant experience can be so daunting when you arrive. And anyway, so I like to explore, that's part of what I wanted to explore with her. But I also work in nonprofit. I've been working in the same type of work that Julia does. I read a lot about social work, but before I was a therapist, I'm a therapist now, I was like a nonprofit worker. I worked in program development. I worked as a director. So I like to write about the ins and outs of the work of social justice, of doing programs. And like the program she works in is a program that's funded by this foundation, but it's an after-school program for immigrant and refugee children and their families. So I like to talk about the work that I've done, because I think right now specifically, like I started writing that book right around the time when we started separating families on the border, when this country started separating families at the border. And if I was working with children who were coming from Central America, I was working with them doing one-on-one therapy in the schools and at home. And so it felt really present for me, and it like kind of like went into the writing. And Yeah, I think that's kind of like what I try to do with my stories. Of course, it's a joyful book. So it's funny and it's HEA, so it's sexy, and Rocco's got a super dirty mouth, and all of these other things are happening. But I like to talk about those different sides of the immigrant experience, the experience of people of color in this country. Like, there's so much to our lives. We're not just like one thing.
Absolutely. There's like you said, there's the intersection of so many things that are going
Mhm.
on, and I totally get also wanting to always kind of include some sort of like you're for you social justice, and often I include philanthropy of some sort in
Yeah.
mine because I worked in nonprofit as well. I worked, for the juvenile diabetes foundation, and so those kind of it's just like even though I don't go in saying somebody in this book is gonna do something philanthropic, it
Yeah.
just keeps coming up. And I
Yeah.
guess especially it always weighs in a lot of times in the books to show their character and who they are
Hmm.
as an individual. So it always comes up. It's different sorts of programs and working with different things. A lot of times it's kid related because I did work at a
Yeah.
one that had to do with children. But yeah, I definitely get that, and
Yeah.
so I
It's
love that you include that.
I feel like it's also like the part of like we're writing good people, but like good people do good, you know. And
Exactly.
so I think you like writing people doing good feels important, especially when
Yeah.
we're writing about people of color.
I absolutely agree. So we talked about your female protagonist, and so your male protagonist, Rocco
Yes.
Quinn, is a fellow New Yorker. So the two of them have that in common, but they're on very opposite sides of the fence because, like you said, he's there and he doesn't see the value of what she does, and she is in her dream job. He doesn't see the value of that, and he's trying to shut her down. So give us a little bit more insight into his character.
Yeah, he's an interesting character. So I love to put a man in therapy. I'm a therapist, so I love to put a man in therapy in a book. And Rocco, Rocco has a very like he's kind of like this big financial advisor. So he's coming in with all this like power, right, into the book. And I think a lot about power dynamics and things like that with my story. So especially in workplace romances, you got to really be like towing that line of not giving like the
Right.
male protagonist too much of the power. Like you have to kind of balance that out. So um, with him, his family background is the one that's actually like really he had like a really rough upbringing. Like Julia's parents are solid; they have a great marriage. She had like a great family life. They're super supportive. They have great professional lives. And his family is the one that's kind of broken. So his parents are both alcoholics. Like it was a violent home. He has a younger sister who's a young mother. She's like 21, so she had her child as a teen, and so he has this like goal to like get her out of like their parents like environment. Like
Mm.
he wants they're so toxic. He doesn't want like his little niece to grow up around like their toxic behavior and their
Mm.
toxic dynamic. So he comes into that job with like, I will do whatever it takes to get this job done because I need the promotion that's coming after this project because I need to get my sister out of New York City. I need to get her, like, he has this plan to buy her a house, like, in the suburbs of New York City. And so he comes with, like, a real life motivation and also with, like, this, like high stakes of, like, he needs to get his sister out of the situation, like, that she's in. Like, their parents are just so bad for all of them. So in that sense, I kind of like really like juxtapose them because even though she's kind of like in the more fragile position in terms of the work environment, she actually has like a safe landing back home when he does not. So he's got a lot riding on this job. And for Julia, of course, it's her dream job. She wants to keep it, but you know, she can always go back home. She just doesn't want to. But
Right.
for him, he really needs to get out from around his family. So, and he's, you know, he's a guy from Queens and they're both from like Queens. Like she's from Corona and he's from Corona, Queens too. So they have like a lot of things in common of just like the neighborhood and like the accent and all these like little things that come up in the book.
I love what you've done with their characters in terms of, like you said, kind of switching because of the power dynamics already. And so we do normally see it the other way around, where she's the one who has all of these issues. And then, plus, I just love that. And especially I love that fact, that gives us more reason as to, his motivation and really understanding why it's so important to him, even though
Yeah.
it might on the surface looks like he's a bad guy because he's coming in trying to shut down this important, community program or whatever. So
Yeah. Yeah, and like the thing about him is like his emotional arc is very tied against like his moral crisis, like his crisis of conscience around shutting down this program, because he really sees the value in it. And as he gets to know Julia, he really comes to understand, like, I can't just shut this down. Like, families depend on this. It's not even about like him liking her, not wanting to take her job. It's like, this is like an important program. It serves a lot of people. And so his emotional arc really kind of gets really tied up to like doing the right thing, and also thinking about like he really isn't responsible to save his sister's life. Like, he has to also take care of himself. So anyway, it's complicated. Like, life is complicated.
life is complicated. Exactly. I love
Yes.
that. I love complicated characters and I love complicated stories. So I'm going to take a minute to say hello to some of our viewers tonight. And Shannon Harper says hello.
Hi, I see Elizabeth E.
Yes. And Mama Tony says hello, hello, good evening. Hello, Mickey. Hi, author D.L. White. So glad to have you all here with us this evening. And so, and Elizabeth E., like you said, so um, looking back, when you made that post the other day on Facebook about kind of your writing journey, I was just like floored because it's so hard to believe that your first release was just 19 months ago. And since then you've had 6 full-length novels and 2 novellas published. Many of them have been critically acclaimed. Lots of them have found their way on best of lists, including, like Entertainment Weekly's best of list. Here to Stay has it starred, Publishers Weekly review and stuff. So it's wild to think that it's just been 19 months. So did the success that you're experiencing as a new author, did it come as a complete surprise to you, or did it kind of feel like destiny?
It's been interesting because it's not really how I feel like, I mean, I've been very fortunate. Like, my writing journey has been, I mean, I've been blessed in like a lot of ways. Like, American Dreamer was the first book I wrote. And it was the first full manuscript I wrote, and ever.
Oh wow, that is good, because most of us have those books under the bed.
Right. I started a couple of things, but I that's the first one I finished, and I queried it. I got an agent, and we sold it to Karina. And I was lucky to find my editor, Carrie Buckley, who is just amazing and just like so supportive and just sees what I'm trying to do with my writing. And I think that has really been like a big part of, I think, like what has helped me in my journey, like to have an editor that's just like really understands what I'm trying to do and really doesn't like give me any sort of limitations. She's like, just write what you need to write and like we'll figure out how to get it out into the world. And honestly, like I feel like I came like I talk about this, like I'm good friends with Kennedy Ryan, and she and I talk about this a lot. It's we think of ourselves as like mission driven authors. Like I came into the romance space to do a specific thing. I came into the romance space to write about Afro-Latinx people living full, joyful lives and thriving and striving and having like beautiful futures. And so that's my goal. That's what I came to do. Luckily, it's something that people have connected with. And I just had like a really, and I mean, I started writing when I was like in my very late 30s, like 37. So I think my life experience kind of helped me sort of like be able to go into stories with some clarity. And I I don't know. I guess like I know who I am. I know who I'm trying to write about. And I went in like fearlessly is what I try to do. I try to go in fearlessly into my stories and just write what I need to write. And if it resonates, then amazing. And if it thankfully has, but my goal was like, I was like, if only Dominican people love these books, it's fine. Like that's what I'm writing them for. Like if only Black and brown people love these books, it's fine. That's what I'm writing them for. Like I feel like that's like where I was at. And I think maybe that's why maybe I was a little bit more fearless, more like genuine. I don't know what it is, but I think that was part of it. Like my real goal was like, hey, I want to see a few Dominican people in stories because I've been reading romance since I was 13 years old, and I have never read about a Dominican heroine. I've never read about a Dominican queer character as a central character in a love story, in a romance. And so I want to see those books. It's like the Toni Morrison quote. Like if you want to see a book and you can't find it, then write it. And so that's what I tried to do, and thankfully it's been well received and people seem to really connect with it. I think we're in a part, like so many people have been doing the hard work of opening those doors. People like you, people like Miss Bev, people like Sandra Kitt, like Latinas also that have been opening, like smoothing the ground for us to be able to come in with these different points of view, these different parts of the Blackness spectrum, and presenting like all these little different sides to Blackness and culture. And I think it was just good timing. And I think people are just ready and hungry for more stories that are like really kind of like presenting authentic, genuine experiences of people that haven't been on the page before.
Yeah. I mean, just hearing you say that, all of your life that you're reading, doing this reading of romance and stuff, and you had never run across a Dominican character. That's just crazy. Representation is so important. And as author D.L. White says, it's so crazy for it to be this day and age and not see yourself reflected in art and literature. Yeah, it's unbelievable.
And to think about like the love I have for this genre. Like I've been a voracious romance reader my entire life, and never to get to see any side of myself like as a central character. You have your side characters every once in a while, but not as a protagonist, not as the person that gets to walk into the sunset with their love.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, enough of just being the best friend. It's about time. It's about time. So, my question to readers is: have you read one of Adriana's books yet? And if so, tell us which one. My first book that I've read of yours was Mangles and Mistletoe, a wonderful enemies to lovers, foodie, female novella. Just love that story so much. It was, I think I read it near the end of last year. I was like at a point where I was like, let me just try to hurry up and hit my reading goal. And so like I'm trying to read all the novellas. And that was one of the ones that I read. And I just absolutely loved it. I think I saw Shannon said that she has enjoyed everyone that she's read so far. So I am so excited. I have several of the other books. I just haven't had a chance to read them yet because I'm always writing something.
I know.
So since you brought up the Dreamer series, let's talk about it. And that's what launched your career as an author. And I forgot to say that also Carina Press was where I started as well. That was where my first books went. And Rhonda was my editor at the time. And the series that I wrote was set in, and I seriously think this helped me come out of the slush pile. The series I wrote about was set in Cleveland, and she lives in Cleveland. I'm like, Yes. So let's talk about the Dreamers series that launched your career. First, for readers who aren't familiar with that series, give us a little bit of an overview of it.
Yeah, so it's the first three books are queer romances. So it's gay romances. The three first ones are MM, and it's a series that Elizabeth has read all of them. I know. So yeah, so it's four best friends from the Bronx. They are all Afro-Caribbean. So Nesto, who's the first hero, he's Afro-Dominican, and he is a food truck chef. And he has an Afro-Caribbean like burrito truck. So he takes this truck to Ithaca, New York, where his mom is. His mom has moved from New York City there, and he's gonna try to like make his truck a success because the competition in New York City is like fierce. So he's trying to like carve out his space, and he falls in love with a librarian in Ithaca, New York. I lived in Ithaca, New York for about 5 years. My husband got his PhD at Cornell, so we lived there for 5 years. So we had just moved back to the city when I wrote it. So I was like, I guess I was homesick for Ithaca, which is why I set two of the books there. So, and then the three other books are his other best friends. Camilo, who's Cuban Jamaican, Patrice, who's Haitian, and the last book is Juan Pablo, which is an MF. Actually, it's the heroine is Priscilla, who's Nesto's cousin, and Juan Pablo's Puerto Rican. So it's their 4 books.
Nice.
Yeah.
So tell us that, and it's also nice that you're able to use places that you lived. That's always cool.
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
It's familiar, and you love it, and just you can kind of feel that. Just like when I wrote that first book about Cleveland, I'm like, I probably went over a little bit, but I'm like, I need people to know that there's so much more to Cleveland. We have an art scene, we have this, we have that. So in my head, I'm thinking about all these different things. Like I have scenes that happen at Cleveland Museum of Art, which is one of my favorite places in the world, and and just things like that.
Right.
So it's so much fun
I think like for me, that was the piece of writing to write in a small town. Like Ithaca is a small town. And I mean, not like a teeny town, but it's a college town. And I wanted to be able to write a book and like show that small towns have a lot of diversity, that there's like a lot of people of color, that there's, culture if you are looking for it. Yes. So that's something that I also wanted to do. And Ithaca is kind of like a kind of weird little town in its own way, like in a good way, but yeah. So I haven't ventured out of places that I've lived. At least visited. Mangoes and Mistletoe set in Scotland, and my husband and I went to Scotland like 2 or 3 years ago. So I had like that fresh in my mind. But every other place that I've written, I've either lived in or have like very close ties to it.
Nice. So tell us then and you've already explained that you have a background in social justice and stuff. So where are some of the social justice issues that you've written about?
Well, let's see. I mean, I guess my first book technically doesn't have like a full like social justice subplot, other than like the villain's a racist. Like I basically make my villain like a barbecue Becky. Like it was right around the time that happened, and I had just like this like image of this like really like metally like white lady that just wanted Nesto out of town. Like he wanted to like ruin his business. So that's one. And the second book is it's Camilo, and Camilo is actually domestic violence. I'm a trauma therapist, but the field that I've worked in for a long time is domestic violence, sexual violence. I work only with people who have survived interpersonal violence. And so Camilo, who is one of the heroes, is a program director in a domestic violence agency in New York City. And the other hero, Tom, is Dominican American. His dad is an American expat, but he's like Dominican, grew up in Dominican Republic, came to the States like I did for college or after college. And so Tom is donating a ton of money to the agency that Mila works in, which is not super appropriate, but they like they deal with it. And so I talk a lot about like survivors and doing the work of healing and all these things. So that's kind of like the topic there. The third book is basically, like, I call it my Black Lives Matter romance. It's Patrice is a Haitian he's an economist. So he's gotten this job as a professor in Ithaca, New York at Cornell University as a professor, but he's also like an activist. And the other hero, Easton, is a prosecutor in Ithaca, New York. He's white and he comes from like a very privileged family. He's a really nice guy, just has a lot of privilege. And as they begin to kind of rekindle their relationship, they had like a fling the summer before. As they start to rekindle their relationship, there begins to be racially motivated police stops in Ithaca. And so a lot of the conflict between them is about, the thrust, and not the thrust in the fun way. Not the thrust in the way we like, the thrust in the like the problem thrust. The friction between Patrice feeling like he's compromising himself by dating someone who's part of like the criminal justice system that allows these things to happen. And Easton really finding the moral courage to be a true ally and understand the true meaning of allyship. Like, Easton from the beginning is a good guy, understands these things are wrong, understands like it shouldn't happen, but like it's the idea that you got to have skin in the game. And so and then understanding like the different shades, like just because you're queer but you're a white man doesn't mean you understand what it's like to be a Black man in America. And so it's a larger conversation that I'm trying to have in that book, but really it's about these two people falling in love. So that's probably the hardest book I've written. I had to rewrite that book 3 times.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
Carrie, my editor, who held me down. Carrie held me down through that. And honestly, like, it was a struggle, but I love that book. I'm really proud of it. And it's a love story. It's a romance. It's super sexy, but it's really kind of looking at, my husband's white. So it's also kind of looking at like the real complexities around like being in a relationship with someone that is, white when you're Black, and in the world that we're living in right now. So that's probably like my more like obviously social justice one. The fourth one, I talk always about a lot of stuff. So the fourth one, like Priscilla, the heroine, she is a police officer in New York City. She's a detective. She does special crimes. And she is burnt out. She wants to leave the police force. And what she loves to do is sex education for people of color. She has like a side hustle that basically she's got like an online sex positive sex shop. And she does workshops for disabled folks, for non-binary folks, trans folk, people of color, about like pleasure and kind of dismantling all these like taboos around sex and all these things. And she really sees that as a work of social justice to empower people from marginalized communities to like think about their bodies differently and agency and all these things. So it's kind of like a more like not obvious social justice, but I still think that like the work she was trying to do in her community definitely was the work of social justice. So that's one. And then Julia has this like program in Here to Stay where she does all this work. Oh, and I guess Finding Joy. Finding Joy is set in Ethiopia, where I lived as well.
You lived in Ethiopia too?
I did. We lived in Ethiopia for 5 years, a little bit under 5 years. My husband and I, right after we got married, worked for humanitarian relief organizations for about 7 years. And 5 of those years we were in Ethiopia. And so Finding Joy is an MM. It's set in Ethiopia. And one of the heroes is a Dominican American relief worker. And the other hero is an Ethiopian psychologist / activist. So I talk a lot about queer rights in Ethiopia. It's illegal to be queer in Ethiopia. So there's some of that. illegal to be in a same-sex relationship in Ethiopia. So I talk some of that, but I also talk about like how big countries come into less well-off countries and how they do it, and how we kind of like come into countries and kind of like undo culture and impose our own ways and do things that like really kind of like are imperialistic and invasive. So
that is
but
a pet
also
peeve of
it's a
mine.
super hot romance. Like I was like I try to like back up always. It was like it's actually a romance. I just kind of like explore these things kind of like on the sides. But yeah, I always think about these things because my day job is so tied to all this stuff. So I feel like I'm fluent in it and I can talk about it in a way that doesn't feel preachy. But it's always in there somehow. Like I'm writing historicals now and I'm like, how am I going to do it now? And I'm like, oh, there's tons to talk about in the olden days.
Yes, I imagine. Especially when we still have so much to talk about right now. So yeah. Okay, so when it comes to romance, you know, a lot of readers and authors have very different opinions about, you know, how it should be. And so some feel that romance is just their complete escape and they want it to be completely absent of the harsh realities of life. Whereas others like seeing characters who overcome hardships in their lives to find their happy ending. And like me, you are obviously in the latter camp and you like to see some of these things be incorporated into a story. So why is it so important to you to address issues of social justice and real life issues in romance?
I mean, I think the way I think about it is that my aim when I'm writing, I mean, I write Afro-Latinx characters. I like about half of my books are interracial, but half of my books aren't. And there's always an Afro-Latinx person that's like the main character. And so I'm writing my people. And what I'm trying to do is write full people. There's never like just one side to a person, right? Like you're not just only your work, or you're not just only your love life. You're not just only the person you are to your family. And I think part of what has been missing largely from fiction, especially like genre fiction, which is what we write in, is own voices, right? So I'm writing from an own voices point of view. I'm writing from my lived experience. So I want to propose that we are whole people, that we're multidimensional, that we contain multitudes, that we can care about our work of social justice and still want to peg our boyfriends. Like that both those things can happen at the same time.
Right.
And that we can, and then like literally, like I can like be wanting to like do the work of social justice, peg my boyfriend, have a fight with my mom all in the same day, and still be happy mostly with my life and like be in love. And I think what has been missing from us is that ability for us to be these like very like complex beings that can do all of that at the same time, because we've been like we have been able to be one thing,
right?
And so that to me is why I feel like I don't have to hold back on presenting these things that matter to me. And again, like going back to my mission, I write romance full of people who look and sound like my people. And so my people think about these things, think about their place in the world. And so, and being agents of change and being people who are like moving in the world to do good things and also have hot sex and also eat good food. And so it's like that piece of like, we don't only have to be one thing. So that's why I feel like I want to write what's important to me, and I don't have to deprive myself of that, because it would impact my creativity if I held back. Yeah.
I love that. And you make such a good point, because we do tend to be very one-dimensional in so many of the stories that we do appear in, like you said, we're the side character or we're super one dimensional or whatever, and there's so many layers to us. And one of the comments I had from a fellow author, actually, white author, who no matter how much I try to erase it from my brain, I cannot. And she basically said she never read Black stories because they're always about basically, like, they're always about hardship and pain, and she's not in the mood, usually in the mood for that. And there were so many reasons why I saw Red and was so angry.
Right.
But one of them, like you said, is this whole idea of, like, dude, what's wrong with you? First of all, that told me you never really picked up any Black books in the first place, if that's what you think, that we only have stories about hardship and pain. But just like any other story, we should be allowed to have all of these different dimensions to our story, and every story doesn't have to have everything. So sometimes when I see a reader or somebody comment that basically that the story wasn't Black enough, because they didn't have all this kind of hardship and pain or whatever, it's just, it's ridiculous. So yes, absolutely, there's so many different facets to us,
And we're
and
not a monolith. We're not a monolith. We're not just one thing. We're not just telling one story. And I think that's part I think of what is kind of, I think, to me, it's like the idea of publishing in general was built to tell one story, And so we are coming in and we're expanding that world. We're expanding the universe, the landscape for publishing. And so I think that's when you come against these commentaries or these ideas, these narratives, like, Black people only in on the page in pain and trauma is what they experience. And within the larger publishing world, that is a narrative that exists. That we have to be, and so I resist that. Like, for me, like, and I mean, I've read your books, you also do this. Like, I do not break my characters so that they can have a happy ending. Like, we're out here saying, like, radically, like, Black people can just have fun and still have a happy ending.
Wow.
We're just being radical. And so I think that's also part of it, right? Like, that's what we're doing with these stories. Like, we're like, no, we can do these, like, really complex characters, and they're still just regular Black people.
Yeah. So I'm going to take a minute to address some of the comments. Elizabeth E. said, Priscilla's work is radical. It's one of my favorite things about the book. The message that everyone deserves joy and love.
Yes.
Love that. And then D.L. White says, most small town novels and movies are based on Southern or Midwest white towns. That's why I wanted my small town series to be Black folks. That's really in response to somebody's earlier comment. And Mickey Black asks, are there any social issues you steer away from?
Well, I mean, I haven't really intentionally steered away from any of them. But I try to, so far, I haven't been writing for that long. So far, I try to stay within the things that I have worked within. And so most of my work has been, international humanitarian relief, or then in the U.S., domestic violence, interpersonal violence, and then immigrant rights. And so those are the things that I have worked in. And so I've stayed within that purview. But I don't know. I guess there's things like, I don't know. I can't think of anything that I would probably, like, intentionally stay away from. Yeah, I don't know.
I think, like you said too, about not writing fearfully, or
Yes.
allows you to be just more authentic and move forward. So just like in my December release that's coming up, there are issues that I talk about that, Black people deal in the workplace and stuff. And,
Right.
I was like, don't overthink it. Just write it. Just put it all out there. And if they have an issue and they want to, ask me about it, let's discuss it. Or why it's important that it gets in here. But it was never questioned at all. Like none of the things that I thought they were going to question, especially since it's small town romance, were questioned at all. And so I was super happy even that we're going with the theme of steamy small town, which is not something you normally hear people say.
Right.
Because, I think that's one of the reasons a lot of times you don't hear people think of diverse small town romances like what we all are writing, like what DL writes and so many of us write.
Yeah.
People don't call it small town because, it is sexier or whatever and it has brown people. So, just like Summer's comment, about, thinking of small towns as mostly being, white people, because that's the way it's always portrayed or whatever. But there's definitely plenty of us from small towns, that's for sure.
Yeah, so, and I mean it's interesting. Even with like now that I'm starting to write historical, and the historical space is extremely white, right? And so as a subgenre, I don't know, it's just white. And so right after I announced that my deal was coming, someone actually told me in my comments, like in my mentions, said, "Oh, this must be historical fantasy because." Because there's no record that I know of Latin American people being in Europe in the 19th century. And so, and I had done a ton of research and I was like ready for this question. I didn't think it was going to come 2 days after my announcement, but I knew it would come.
Yeah.
And so I was ready and I had like a whole thing that I kind of like showed her, like, this is like just part of my research. We were in fact all over Europe. But, to think that in 2020, someone with the ability to go on the internet can think that in the entire 100 years of the 19th century, no one from Mexico all the way down to Argentina ever set foot in Europe 400 years into colonization. Can you imagine? And so, like, to think that's something that someone could think, because the narrative, because what's been, it's white people, right? And so, like, I think that's like when we think of small town romance, it's just white people because that's what's been on the page.
Yeah, and Hallmark movies. It's just mostly, just almost all. So that's a whole nother thing I don't want to get into right now. But Summer says, I have so many feelings of people who say that they don't read Black romance because of negativity. I'm tired of giving my super long list of recommendations. Stop generalizing. And then Elizabeth says, make them do the work because we know the books are out there waiting for them. That they are. If you do a little work, you'll find them. So
just an easy Google search.
It's, and it's so funny because we can use it for whatever we want to use it for, but it's funny when it comes to stuff like that, suddenly people don't know how to use it. So my question to readers is, do you read romances that tackle real life issues? Why or why not? Tell us in the comments. So my question to you, Adriana, is while some readers might feel that social justice issues detract from a feel-good story, your position is that those issues can actually strengthen the happily ever after of the story. Why?
I mean, I think it just makes for more complex people. I think more complex people make for more interesting characters. And it gives me a lot of, I like to think, I like to write, like, I usually write in first person. I'm writing in third person now in my historicals. And it's been a struggle. But I write deep first person POV. And so I do a lot of like inner life of the character and tackling like all these like complex things as you're falling in love, I just think makes for like a more interesting person. Like I'm thinking about like Patrice and Easton. Like, you know, Patrice is out here like trying to be a Black Lives Matter activist. He's falling for literally like the criminal justice system representative in his town. And so, and they have amazing sex. Like it's so good. But like he is conflicted. He is conflicted. He's falling in love because he's a good guy. Like Easton's a good guy. And so to me, it just makes it so much more interesting, and that happily ever after so much more satisfying when you have people that have grown not only in their ability to fall in love, but that have grown as human beings. And like they see the world differently, like their worldview has shifted. And I like to write people who are already like on the cusp of that. I hate reading books about like clueless men. I was telling, I've been saying this. Can we curse? Can I curse? I'm not
knock yourself out.
I was like, I'm tired of reading about man babies with big dicks. Like, I cannot read one more book about a grown man who has no manners and has no emotional like intelligence whatsoever. So I want to write people who are like on the cusp of like being their like best selves, or like on the cusp of like finding the reason to achieve that. And when you throw in like big complex things, like really like things that are going to bring like a more like crisis of conscience, then like I think it makes for like more compelling, more satisfying HEAs and characters.
I would absolutely agree with that. And just like having people with some depth to them for real. We need that. That just, it's way more interesting than reading about some boring super rich dude. You know what I'm saying? Just
I cannot read another man baby. I really am like, I'm like, no more man babies, please.
The man babies. X through all the man babies, please.
No more boycott man babies.
Yes, for real. So what tips would you give to an author if an author was considering writing a story, then they wanted to include some social justice issue or some other serious issue in their story? What recommendation would you give them to as far as things they should or should not do?
Well, I would say like if you're trying to like really tackle a social justice issue, I would definitely say tackle something that you have some very like like you have deep feelings about, and that's something that you understand and have like you have like the texture of it, you understand it, like you have your own personal like ties or commitments or passion for that specific type of thing, like whether it's environmental justice, whatever. Like Kennedy Ryan wrote The Kingmaker last year, and the hero was like trying to do like all this work in like environmental justice, and the heroine, like the meet cute, is like at a pipeline protest. Like she had like such like an understanding of that world of activism in that world, and you could feel it in the book. And so I think you really have to be able to have some kind of proficiency in that topic if you're going to tackle, like if you're going to go hard. Like if you just want to like have it as something that you kind of like suggest in the book, then I would say just do your research. But if it's going to be like part of like the emotional arc of the characters, then I would definitely say like try to do something that is already something that you're passionate about.
Yeah. If you're, especially if you're invested in it and it really means something to you, that really comes across in the story, as opposed to you just trying to throw it up there for some, oh, my editor said more conflict. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I feel like you just don't want like something that's like some other person's struggle or some other groups of people struggle to be like your plot device. Like it's not a good, I don't think it's a good choice.
Yeah. Caitlin says, I love romances that talk about real life issues just because you can learn so much from them. Plus they're easy to relate to. I love that too, one of my big things about the world in general is a lack of empathy that so many people have for people who do not look like them, live like them, love like them.
Yeah.
To me, if people were even just had a little bit of empathy for anybody outside of their little bubble, the world would
Right.
be so much a much better place. So, like, I'm not trying to be on any soapbox or anything, but I do always try to write the stories in a way where you have an opportunity, if you have a heart at all, to gain some empathy for somebody perhaps who is a little bit different from you in one way or another.
You need empathy in this world.
Yeah, for sure. On the other hand, Summer says, I steer away from real life issues mentioned in the blurb, but I have enjoyed most of what I've read. Miss Kennedy Ryan makes me way too introspective, though.
It does that.
So yeah, I mean, I definitely understand both sides where like some people are, okay, I have a hard enough life, or there's enough going on in the world where I just want to kind of escape all of that. One of the reasons too, I sometimes like to address issues like that, is for me, I also love the fact that it can give hope to somebody who is in a similar situation to feel like I can find love, or I can, get out of this situation, or things will eventually get better. I love being able to give somebody that kind of hope, in addition to the fact that given, ability and the opportunity to give people a chance to learn some empathy for other people. So those are some of the reasons why I like to read and write stories that include some sort of, real life issues instead of just fluffy, people who everything has been sunshine and roses for them all of their lives. So
Agreed.
So Adriana, tell us what is coming for you next.
What's coming for me, like right immediately? I have a novella. It's my first historical to come out. It's a novella in an anthology called DILF, Duke I'd Like to F.
When I saw the name of that, I'm like, okay, is Amazon going to freak out? How are y'all going to handle that?
No, Amazon was fine. And it's called The Duke Makes Me Feel. And it's about it's set in 1879, mostly in Paris. And it's about a herbalist root worker from the Dominican Republic and an accidental Duke. And so they go on a trip to Paris together to find his sister, who is her best friend. And it's very hot. There are bigger tinctures. He doesn't need them. So that's the next one. And then I have the last installment of the Dreamer series, American Christmas. And it's a novella about Yin and Ari, who are in a couple of the books. They're like the first employees that Nesto, who is the hero in the first book, hired for his food truck. So it's their little like love story. And that's coming out. I think they're coming like 3 weeks out, 3 weeks apart. I think the anthology is coming out like first week in November, and the other one's coming out like 2 weeks after. So that's like what's immediately coming out.
I know that was very bittersweet writing that final piece of Dreamers series and kind of being done with that. I'm almost there with my Bourbon Brothers series. I'm on the penultimate book right now, the second to last one. And then it'll be the last one in that particular series. And so it's going to be
I know. I'm excited to, I'm actually writing right now the first category. I have 2 categories with Desire, and I'm writing the first one right now, and it's been interesting. I've read all of your books in the last 6 months.
Oh wow! Thank you.
I had read quite a few of them, but I'm rereading every category I've liked in like the last 2 years. So I'm like, how do I write an alpha?
I love it. Thank you. Elizabeth says, I want that novella. And Summer says, I love historical. That might have to be my first. Oh, let me see. No, I just saw one where she said she loves historical. That might have to be her first read by you. It's in here somewhere. And oh yeah, here it is. Here she is. She's historical. That might have to be my first read by you.
Oh, and she studied medicinal plants in Dominican Republic.
Oh, yes. Yes, yes, yes.
That's amazing. And part of my heroine's issue is that she has to learn how to work with the plants that are in Europe because she's not in the tropics anymore. So there's a little bit of that in the story.
Nice. Oh, and I did miss DL's comment that for romance, I want an escape. If I want real life issues, I read literary fiction or nonfiction. So yeah, there's definitely both sides, and I can understand why. But and the thing is, like a lot of times, but a lot of the romances like that do cover, they do have some of these other issues. Like it's not the focus of the story; it's just a part of the story. It's just a part of it's just a part of the person's life, the part of what makes it real. But definitely that's the beauty of romance. There's a little bit out there for everybody. So whatever you like, don't like, or whatever, there's something for you. Caitlin says, I'd like to read more books about disabled people just because that's me personally. So that's something I know I can relate to.
Yeah.
I agree. Yeah. I definitely would like to see
more disabled rap.
Yeah, because that's the thing, it's just like inclusion. There's so many ways in which stories need to be more inclusive.
Yeah.
So we often just look at race and ethnicity, but there's sexual orientation,
gender identity,
whether they have ability or not, don't have abilities, things like that. And so we all want to see ourselves in the story and get that happy endings. So,
yep.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for being here.
You.
How can readers connect with you if they want to connect with you on the interwebs?
Well, they can go to my website, Adriana Herrera Romance, and there's a lot of stuff there. But you can find me on Instagram at Ladriana_Herrera, Twitter _Ladriana Herrera. Although I'm not on there that much anymore, but I'm there. And then Facebook, Adriana Herrera.
And I do have the link to Adriana's website in the description for the show below. So if you are trying to connect with her on any other platforms, you can easily do it from her website where the link is below. There's also a link to Here to Stay to get your copy of Here to Stay as well. So thank you for that. And so if you enjoy the show, don't forget to subscribe, and share the show. Thank you again, Adriana, for joining us today. It was wonderful having you here. So thank you, and best of luck to you on all of your new projects. Take care. So that was Adriana Herrera, and we got a chance to talk about how much reality you wanted in your story. So there's people on both sides. I'm glad we got a chance to hear from both sides. I love that we heard from both sides. So no matter what you want, there's something out there for you. So, and then next week, as I said, we'll be talking about grown folks romance or seasoned romance or older couples romance, however you want to phrase it, with Karen Booth, Cheryl Lister, Suzette Harrison, and Lisa Salvery, who runs the Romance in Her Prime. So don't forget to subscribe and hit the reminder bell so you'll be notified of that show, which is going to be at a special time, 8 p.m., as well as all future shows. And if you have a suggestion for someone you would like to see me chat with, don't forget to leave that in the comments as well. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you on the next live stream.